Hello everyone, intuitive and astrologer Lisa Salvatore here to talk to you about the incoming Venus retrograde that we have taking place on March 1st, but it is already very much in effect. In this video, we're going to go into the deeper meaning and symbolic significance of the planet Venus and her retrograde cycle and how this can affect all of us personally, as it's a part of a much larger story. Before we get into it, welcome to all of my new subscribers. It is lovely to have you here. Please be sure to like, share, and make sure that you hit that bell icon so that you are notified of all new uploads. Plus, it really helps to grow my channel, and I thank you so much for all of your support. And to my existing subscribers, welcome back. It is always lovely to have you here. I will also go through what this retrograde could mean for you by your sign, by your rising sign. You can pull up your birth chart fast and free right on my website, linked in the description box below, lisasalvatore.com. And then I also have a tutorial linked here in the description box that will show you how you can identify the degrees of the planets through your chart as they land in your chart. So if you're interested in this and how this Venus retrograde will impact you personally, I highly suggest that you have your birth chart handy with your exact time of birth using the Placidus house system so that you can track these Venus energies. Why would we even want to track Venus? First off, Venus retrograde is not the same as Mercury retrograde, let's say. We have Mercury retrograde 3 times per year. And yes, Mercury is a personal planet, but the retrograde of Mercury is not necessarily as personal. When Mercury is retrograde, we know that all of the areas that Mercury rules over, such as technology, travel, communication, information, miscommunication, just to name a few things, all of those areas tend to go a little wonky. They tend to go a little bit haywire, and we will all experience them. Some cycles will feel much more annoying than others, but we always see this playing out collectively somehow. And then, of course, your own personal story based upon your own unique astrology. Venus retrograde, however, is quite different. First off, none of the planets technically move backwards throughout the sky. It is just through the motion of the planets around the sun from our vantage point here on Earth that the planets appear to be moving backwards. But what they're actually doing is they're slowing down. In the case of Venus, Venus has phases, and a Venus retrograde will only occur once every 18 months for 40 days. And for those that are familiar with the biblical references of 40, there's a much larger story and a lot of mythology surrounding Venus, Venusian energy. The most significant point of the Venus retrograde cycle is the midway point, and I'm going to go through the significant dates here in a moment, but the most significant point of the Venus retrograde cycle is that midpoint when we have what we call the Venus cazimi, which is the inferior conjunction of Venus and the Sun. This is where Venus passes up from the underworld, essentially, and moves from evening star to morning star. Speaking of the underworld, throughout the ages and all of mythology, there's always a story about Venus, the goddess of love and pleasure and beauty, taking her descent into the underworld. Venus is the planet of connection. She rules over the way that we do relationships. She's about what we like, our aesthetic tastes, what we find pleasing, the way that we connect both to others and especially to self, the way that we value ourselves, our money. Venus rules over ethics, equality, justice, fairness. Venus is the planetary ruler of both Taurus and Libra. It's important to note that when Venus rules over Taurus, Venus is what we call a morning star. Venus is also the ruler of Libra, and in Libra, Venus is an evening star. This is the point of the Venus cycle, Libra season, where Venus is an evening star. This is why in mythology, you can hear that Venus has 2 faces. She literally does. Her morning star, her evening star, her Taurus phase, her Libra phase. This is all about the way that we place value and emphasis on the self and on the others. In Taurus, Venus is more about the senses. She's about the physical. She's about how we feel. She's sensuality. She's grace. She's more about what we have and what our attachments and possessions are and the way that we attach to those possessions. In Libra, Venus is slightly more detached and very concerned about the others. This is about where we do relationships. This is about our relationships, the way that we function in our relationships. This is the whole we versus me factor. These are the 2 different sides of Venus. The interesting thing about this Venus cycle, about the Venus cycle in general, is that the work of Venus, the Venus work that we all do every day unconsciously, that we're not necessarily always conscious even that we're doing, is all year long while Venus is direct. That's really where the hard work is. That's where all of the realizations are. When Venus is retrograde, it's really about going in and doing some refinement on all of the Venus areas of life. We reevaluate all of our relationships, our relationship dynamics, our relationship to self, our own love nature, our money, the way that we feel, the way that we look, all of that falls under Venus. So when Venus is retrograde, retrogrades are always an invitation and a time to take a step back, to go inward and to reflect. And so what are we reflecting upon? All of the things that Venus rules over. This is why you'll hear it said that exes can come back under Venus retrograde. Old friends come back and visit us again. I want to stress that does happen a lot under Venus retrograde. And a lot of times it's not about rekindling past relationships. It's about closing out the karma. Every situation is different, obviously. In some cases, you might be the one instigating reconnection, only to have the door closed in your face or reopened. Again, different for everyone. But yes, of course, under a Venus retrograde, feelings of the past will be revisited, past situations, emotions, all of that, because these areas are what fall under Venus and what happen to come up for review under a Venus retrograde. Thinking about this at a deeper level, Venus is the goddess of love and beauty and pleasure. In almost all forms of Venus mythology, Venus takes a trip into the underworld. Venus visits the underworld. Think of that underworld as Venus becoming an evening star. Venus spends time in the underworld and then ascends back up into the light of day as a changed woman. Venus is the divine feminine. She rules the divine feminine in all of us. One thing is certain about Venus, when she emerges from the underworld, she has metamorphosized. Persephone, which is Venus, goes to the underworld to Pluto, which is Hades, the god of hell, the lord of the underworld. We have Inanna and Ereshkigal, the Mesopotamian goddesses. Inanna is the goddess of heaven and earth. She's all things beauty and pleasure. Ereshkigal is the goddess of the underworld, the lord of death, the goddess of death. She's married to the lord of the plague and disease. There's several different variations of the Inanna and Ereshkigal myth, but the bottom line is it focuses on greed and envy, and how sometimes what we want the most is what actually is going to lead to our demise, and it's not the best for us. And in other cases, it has us emerge as a changed being, as a changed soul. Real quick, the myth of Inanna and Ereshkigal goes something like this. Inanna hears whispers beckoning her to go into the underworld to visit her sister, Ereshkigal, the goddess of death. In some versions of this story, it is said that Inanna goes down to the underworld to actually overthrow Ereshkigal. I'm not really sure about that. But the bottom line is Inanna feels called to visit the underworld. One of her dear friends tries to convince her not to, but she says, I just have to go. I feel like I need to go. And if I'm not back in 3 days, come for me. So Inanna sets out to go into the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal. And there are 7 bolted gates that Inanna has to go through. Each gate that Inanna comes to, she has to let go of a part of herself. She has to take something off that she considers or deems as important, as a part of herself, as holding great value. At the first gate, it's her crown. And that gives her an idea of how this is going to go as she descends further and further into the underworld. She is stripped away of all of her artifices. By the time she gets to the 6th gate, she's basically stripped of all of her jewelry, all of her adornments. She arrives broken and battered and naked. She gets to the throne of Ereshkigal, and Ereshkigal stares at her, and Inanna dies. And I haven't read this in a long time, so I'm probably butchering it a little bit, but this is the gist of the story. Ereshkigal stares Inanna down, and Inanna dies. 3 days later, when Inanna does not return to heaven and earth, they send for her. Ereshkigal gives her the water that will revive her. She then has to sacrifice something so that she can return, as a morning star, Venus, so she can return back up to the pleasantry that her life was before. So she decides to sacrifice her husband. When Inanna ascends from the underworld, she's a changed woman because all of those things that she thought made her who she was, all of those possessions that she had, all of the jewelry that she wore, the crown on her head, all that was artificial was stripped away from her. Bare bones. She literally died in the underworld. So when she comes up, she emerges realizing that none of that really matters. She's a changed woman. The Venus retrograde process kind of goes something like that. We emerge differently, as does Venus, on her metamorphosis from evening star to morning star. Something becomes more obvious and evident to us about our own love nature, about what we have, about what we believe in, about what we love and whom we love, about what's genuinely important. Now, this retrograde will begin in the sign of Aries, where Venus is debilitated, and then Venus will actually recede back into Pisces. So Venus will more than likely retrograde through 2 different areas of your birth chart. That's why you have to check the degrees. And again, I have the supportive content to help you with that linked in the description box below. You're going to want to reflect back to 2017 because Venus is very predictable. And Venus basically did this same dance at the same time through the same signs in 2017, 8 years ago. Every 8 years, Venus will retrograde in the same area of the sky through the same signs. So she retrogrades once every 18 months, and then once every 8 years, she will retrograde through the same sign or same 2 signs. So back in 2017, we had the retrograde of Venus through Aries and Pisces. So again, if you can reflect back to that time period, think about what was going on for you. For some, it might seem very obvious and big, while for others, you might not really be able to connect it, and that's fine. But there is some kind of metamorphosis that will be taking place for you, internally, externally, or both. Venus shows us what we are genuinely attached to, and if it's really right for us, if it's really working for us, and if it's really necessary. Venus is all about attachment, and sometimes we have to let go. That's challenging. Think about the sign of Taurus. Taurus doesn't really like to let go, but we must let go to grow. Venus talks about that. Here are some key Venus moments and dates that you're going to want to be aware of. On January 28th, Venus entered what we call her pre-retrograde shadow zone. What this means is that Venus at 24 degrees and 37 minutes of Pisces entered the exact degree where she will later station direct at the very end of her cycle, when she's officially ascended from the underworld as a changed soul. On March 1st, Venus will officially station retrograde at 10 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries. So you're going to want to look to your birth chart and find the part that contains not only Aries, but more specifically the 10-degree point. Real quick, I'm just pulling up the transit chart right now as I record this video. You can see when I say 10 degrees of Aries, for example, this is Aries right here. And if you use a free website such as astro.com, it will actually show you the symbols, okay? So you'll see here that this is Aries at 9 degrees and 55 minutes. So if this were someone's birth chart, their Venus would be at 8 degrees and 53 minutes of Aries, which means that at the start of this Venus retrograde, they would feel this personally because Venus retrogrades at 10 degrees and is going to move back over their Venus. But we see here in this chart that Pisces is at the cusp of the 8th and 7th house at 12 degrees. So for this individual, if this transit chart were an actual birth chart, this individual would have this whole entire retrograde through their 8th house because Venus and Pisces are both here. I went ahead and just quickly pulled up a random chart. I always have to have a name for my charts, okay? Don't ask why. So this is Henry. So maybe that's a validation for somebody watching this video of a Henry in their life. Anyway, Henry's birthday is June 24th, 1966. So we see here in Henry's chart, if we look at where 10 degrees of Aries would be, you see 4 degrees is at the edge of the 6th, moving back to the 5th. So this Venus retrograde would actually begin in Henry's 5th house, but it would move back into Henry's 4th house because Venus gets back to 24 degrees of Pisces. And then when Venus stations direct, Venus will then move back from the 4th into the 5th. I hope that makes sense. So if you want to see more below about how you can track these energies in your birth chart, I have the content in the description box. Recapping, Venus enters pre-retrograde shadow zone on January 28th at 24 degrees of Pisces, and we can start to maybe feel a little bit of what this Venus energy, this Venus retrograde could bring up for us. Then on March 1st, Venus will actually station retrograde at 10 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries. Everyone will experience this Venus retrograde energy, but it will likely feel much more pronounced for those that have strong Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, and even more if you have anything between basically 1 and 10 degrees of any of our cardinal signs, which is Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra. And then if you have anything at the later degrees of Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, you will likely feel parts of this cycle more strongly, but honestly, it's definitely going to feel more heightened for the cardinal energies, Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, Libra. On March 22nd, we have the literal bright spot of the Venus retrograde cycle. This is where Venus is exactly between the sun and the earth. This is her cazimi moment. This is the inferior conjunction of Venus and the sun. The energies of Venus become amplified through the radiance, by the radiance and the warmth of the sun. Think of it that way. This could be a major epiphany, an aha moment, a feel-good moment. Something comes to light. There's a recognition, a reconciliation. It's a literal bright spot. And the interesting thing about this cazimi is that it also falls right in between eclipses. Check out my March overview if you already haven't done so, where I go into much more detail about that. But this is also happening right in the middle of eclipse season. So talk about fate, talk about destiny. So when you hear people say, don't start a new relationship under Venus retrograde, I'm going to tell you that I think that that is hogwash, okay? In some cases, okay, fine, it could be very valid. But the thing is, if somebody comes into your life under Venus retrograde and it feels right and it feels good for you, enjoy the moment. Enjoy it for what it is. And maybe it won't be forever, but maybe it will. Just because Venus is retrograde, it doesn't mean that a relationship that starts under that retrograde can't last. There could just be some situations with it, some caveats, some things that have to be dealt with. And because it's during eclipse season, there's going to be this energy. And let's not forget that that solar eclipse in Aries that we have taking place on March 29th is at 9 degrees of Aries. This Venus retrograde begins at 10 degrees of Aries. So pay attention to everything and anything coming in and out of your life and everyone, especially if you're an Aries, Capricorn, Libra, Cancer. What's coming back around? What needs to be revived or rekindled? What needs to have the door slammed on it once and for all? Strong energies of destiny throughout this Venus retrograde cycle, especially when we get to the Cazimi point. Then Venus will recede back into Pisces on March 27th, and that will definitely feel probably a lot more intuitive, but also a lot more emotional, and perhaps a lot more compassionate, a little bit less edgy, because remember, Venus loves to be in Pisces. She's said to be exalted there, but she is still retrograde. While in Aries, Venus is in her exile, which doesn't mean bad. It just means she struggles a little bit. In Aries, Venus can be a little bit too impatient. She can be a little bit too hot-headed. So we might have to reevaluate where we can be that way, where we have the potential to be that way in our own relationships, or the way we're like that within ourselves. Venus will then station direct on April 12th at 24 degrees and 37 minutes of Pisces. And Venus will not technically leave that retrograde zone until May 16th when she gets back to 10 degrees of Aries. Then she's full steam ahead. And Venus emerges as a changed soul. A part of us has been reborn. We've gone through something that has shifted us, changed us, if even only our perspective, but something has shifted. So it could be very beneficial to track it personally, as Venus is a very personal planet. Right now, as I record this video, Venus is an evening star. We're in middle to late Feb here. Venus is an evening star. She is visible in the west after sunset. She is between the sun and the earth. By the time we get to the Cazimi, March 22nd, March 23rd, Venus will be invisible. We will not see her because she will be engulfed by the sun's energy, by the sun's light. This is a very, very significant point of this Venus cycle, as I mentioned earlier, on so many levels. At the end of that retrograde cycle, she will now be a morning star, bright and glorious in the morning skies. She's visible in the east just after sunrise. This is where she's on the other side of the sun from the earth. So Venus is literally the brightest in the evening sky right now. Now let's talk about how this can impact you by your rising sign. I always suggest that you follow your rising sign for most accuracy. Grab your birth chart, put in the exact time, use the Placidus house system so that you can get the precise degrees and track these energies most accurately. For most individuals, this retrograde will begin in one house of the birth chart and back into a second house. So it's going to occur in two different parts of your birth chart. But like I showed you in the sample before, for some individuals, it might be all in one. That's why it's important to really track and use your birth chart. Because if I say Gemini rising is XYZ, and then you're reading two different houses when in reality you only have one, or vice versa, it may not land the same way for you. It may not resonate the same. And the whole purpose of why I put this content out here is because I want you to be able to feel empowered through your own personal astrology and to be able to do it for yourself in the most basic way possible. I really try to take the wisdom of the stars and bring it down to earth for you in a grounded, digestible fashion and manner. So humor me and go and check your chart. If you are an Aries rising, this retrograde will begin in your first house, which is extremely personal because the first house is the house of self. This is your body. This is your energy. This is your spirit. This is your very essence. This is the way that you are received out in the world. It's the way that you are putting your energy forth, even if you don't necessarily always think so. It's about any changes that you might want to make physically, as it's the first house. One thing that I would be mindful of not doing or undergoing under a Venus retrograde, and I will always stand by this, I would not opt for elective cosmetic surgery. Elective. Sometimes we have to do certain things and the planets might not necessarily be the way we would like for them to be. And that doesn't mean anything bad will happen. It just might mean that it's not the most stellar, no pun intended, time for certain procedures. But sometimes we have to do what we have to do. When Venus is retrograde, however, I usually will caution against nose jobs, for example, unless you absolutely have to do it. Elective cosmetic surgery, so porcelain veneers, dental surgery, a first-time facial treatment, Botox, things of that nature. And the reason why I say that is because Venus rules over beauty. It's the face, it's the aesthetics, it's the appearance. And while retrograde, it could just be that you may not like the results, that's all. Or you may second guess yourself. So it's not the time to go chop your hair. I know people say during Mercury retrograde, don't get a haircut. It's like, that's nonsense. Under Venus retrograde, I would say, really think it through before you do it. Don't do it hastily. That's all. Back to Aries rising. So Aries rising, this retrograde, you would be the one I would say, especially since it's your first house of the body, of the face. I would say, yeah, don't go and get that elective cosmetic surgery. Don't do that facelift under this retrograde. I would wait. But this could be a really great time for you to go inward and reflect upon how you are putting your energy out into the world. How are you showing up in your relationships? Relationships with others, of course, but most importantly, that relationship to self. How much have you grown? How is your confidence? How are you feeling when it comes to your own personal courage and strength? Venus retrograde is a good time to really think about the new routines you want to implement for yourself, especially as they pertain to your body. Then Venus will retrograde back into your 12th house. So at that point of this cycle, you might find that your energy levels take a little bit of a dip. You may feel much more comfortable being in solitude, being more introverted. This is a great time to deepen any spiritual practices for spending time with self and going through some self-reflection. By the time you come out of this Venus retrograde, you're going to emerge into that beautiful morning star, and you're going to feel a lot better about where you are on your journey. Taurus rising, this retrograde will begin in your 12th house. This is a very private space of the chart, a very private space of your life. So you may find the beginning of this retrograde to feel maybe even a little bit somber. You might be mourning the loss of a specific relationship or relationship dynamic, emotional situation. You may be thinking a lot about the past. You might be really working toward letting something go. But your spirituality and your faith is your savior right now under this retrograde cycle. So take some time in quiet reflection. Venus is your ruling planet if you're Taurus rising. So this is going to feel very personal and significant for you as you're really beginning to learn and understand that all that you thought you needed, you might not necessarily need. And then there's other things that you thought you could do without that you're recognizing you do need, especially as this pertains to your friendships. Because when Venus enters Pisces, she will retrograde back into your 11th house, and you're going to be going through a reevaluation process of your friendships and of the groups you're a part of, group dynamics, and also where you want to be within the next 5 years. Very important for you, Taurus. For Gemini rising, this retrograde will begin in your 11th house of friendships and group dynamics, including online communities. This is also the area of your hopes and your dreams and your wishes. Some of you might find yourself rekindling a friendship under this Venus retrograde, while others might actually just shut the door entirely. Communication is enhanced for you throughout this cycle, and then Venus will recede back into your 10th house of career and status and public image. If you don't have a career, this is just going to feel like it's something very public for you at the point of this cycle. You might or might not like that. You're going to be doing a lot of reevaluation about the path ahead. Cancer rising, this retrograde will begin in your 10th house of career and public image, reputation and status, and then it will move back into your 9th house of expansion, learning, education, faith, spirituality. You're going to really be thinking about if you're following your calling and if you are aligned, if your personal life is aligning, if your personal life and habits are actually supporting the face you're putting out into the universe, the face you're putting out into the world. The work and home life balance could come up for you under this retrograde strongly. And you're going to be thinking about the next phase of your life quite a bit. Leo rising, this retrograde will begin in your 9th house of education, higher learning, expansion, faith, beliefs, spirituality. And then it will move back into the 8th house. So that can feel very personal. You're going to be thinking a lot about intimacy, the way it shows up in your life or the way it does not show up in your life, the way you allow yourself to be vulnerable with others or do not allow yourself to be vulnerable with others. You're going to also be very focused on growing some part of your life, especially if you own your own business. You're a fire sign, so you're going to really feel fired up at the very beginning of this cycle, especially as Venus retrogrades through Aries. Virgo rising, this retrograde is going to feel quite personal for you as it will begin in your 8th house of intimacy and private affairs, money, sharing with others. And then it moves back into your 7th house of relationships when Venus enters Pisces. A lot of relationship reviews going on for you, Virgo. You're going to really be thinking about the way you're taking care of yourself, the way you're taking care of others. How is the balance in these dynamics? Are you feeling content? Are the others feeling content? A lot of reevaluation and reflection about intimacy and relationships. Libra rising, this retrograde will begin in your 7th house of relationships and negotiations, and it will back into your 6th house of your home and your health and your daily habits and routines. You're going to be focused on the relationships and the communications in your life, especially as they pertain to the everyday and if they support the daily life that you want to live, something that feels gratifying for you. As Venus is your ruling planet, I want you more than ever to be very conscious and careful about any documents that you might be signing, anything having to do with real estate, anything that has to do with a contract, especially if it has to do with divorce. I would just suggest that you wait until this retrograde passes because things could shift. There could be a change in the wind, especially as we approach the eclipse at the end of March. So don't make any rash moves forward. And I know that I said earlier that starting relationships during a Venus retrograde was not a big deal, but for you, anything that comes up under this Venus retrograde as something new, you really want to take your time with it. Scorpio rising, this retrograde will begin in your 6th house of your daily habits and routines, your health, the way you structure your everyday life. And then it will back into your 5th house of fun and pleasure and children of your own if you have, or your own inner child, the way that you have fun, your hobbies, your recreational activities, what you do in your downtime. It can't just be all work, and this Venus retrograde is going to remind you of that. You want to cultivate practices in your daily life that make you feel emotionally, physically, and spiritually gratified. For Sagittarius rising, this retrograde will begin in your 5th house of fun and pleasure and play, children if you have, your own inner child, your creative projects and endeavors, creative energy in general. You're going to likely be feeling very fired up at the start of this retrograde as you are a fire sign. Just be sure to take a beat, take a minute, take a breath, and take it slow. Venus will then back into your 4th house, and you're probably going to feel more tired and much more introverted and introspective. You may find that during the second part of the cycle, while Venus moves back into Pisces, you're much more focused on your home and your physical environment, your foundation. Maybe this is where you do some home remodeling or home redecorating, painting of the walls. Color features strongly throughout this cycle for you, Sagittarius. For Capricorn rising, this Venus retrograde will begin in your 4th house of your home and your emotional foundation, your family life, family dynamics, and then it will back into your 3rd house of your community, your neighborhood, your work life, your daily habits and routines, cousins, siblings, family. This Venus retrograde will focus strongly on matters of family and matters of the heart. Also, the way that you express yourself in your relationships with loved ones. All of this could be getting a facelift, a metaphorical facelift. Aquarius rising, this retrograde will begin in your 3rd house of communication and expression. This is also the area that speaks to writing. I feel like many of you might be working on communication projects, whether that's podcasting, whether that's a book, film. The beginning of the retrograde cycle has you really reevaluating your behaviors within relationships, especially as it pertains to siblings in your life, or cousins, or those that could present as such. But communicating more effectively in those relationships will feature strongly, especially at the beginning of the retrograde cycle. Then Venus moves back into Pisces and it goes into your 2nd house of self-worth, your own personal finances, what you're placing value on, what you own, what you have, and what you can let go of. Pisces rising, this retrograde will begin in your 2nd house of self-worth and money, your resources, your value, also your self-esteem. And then it will move back into your 1st house. So this is going to feel very personal for you, Pisces, throughout the whole cycle, but more so during that second point when Venus enters Pisces starting on March 27th. Your intuition is going to feel more lit up than ever. You're going to be feeling genuinely ready by the end of this cycle to let go of what is no longer working for you. So just know if you feel stuck, lost, or confused right now regarding a specific relationship in your life or a financial situation that perhaps connects to a specific relationship in your life, just trust that if you go inward and take the time to reflect, by the time that Venus emerges from evening star to morning star, you too will shine again, and you'll feel much more confident in movement forward. There you have it, Venus retrograde through all 12 signs. I hope that that was helpful. I hope that gave you a little bit more insight into Venus and her cycle as a metamorphosis from evening star to morning star, from the underworld to the upper world, how we all go through a metamorphosis time and time again, and how this could connect back to 2017 for some at a much stronger, deeper level. I know we went all over the place in this video and we went through a lot. So if you've made it this far, I wish you nothing but the best. Remember, when it comes to relationships, if something or somebody new comes into your reality, it does not mean that you cannot explore it. It just means remain conscious and mindful every step of the way. If somebody from the past comes back into your life, again, remain conscious and mindful every step of the way. Some relationships are meant to have the door closed on them forever, while others might need to be resurrected, much like Venus resurrects from the underworld, to see the light of day again and to shine brighter. When it comes to cosmetic surgery, I will stand my ground. Elective cosmetic surgery, I would wait. I wouldn't do it. But that's your choice. All right, enough, because this will go on for another 20 minutes. Take really good care. Much love, many blessings. Happy Venus time. And let me know how things progress for you, how things might connect or resonate. Take care. Hello, everyone. Warm wishes for a happy and healthy 2025. I am so excited to be here with all of you, all of my beautiful subscribers, and to continue to put out supportive content. I will continue to give you astrological and intuitive updates. My channel will not be changing. I will be doing new moon and full moon readings, along with some insights through the signs, monthly astrological and energetic updates, astrology updates overall, and some more how-to videos, readings on current events, etc. None of that will change. That will also be here on my channel, but I am excited to roll out a few new options for 2025. Here on YouTube, I now have a membership. That membership is $7.99 a month. You do not have to join the membership, but you can if you want to. And with that membership encompasses is obviously all of the general free content that is out there and will continue to be out there, but with more exclusive content. So every Sunday, I go live and I give the astrological and energetic forecast for the upcoming week. And we have some spiritual chit chat there. There's a live chat. Now that is going to be sent to you with the YouTube membership by recording. If you wanted to be a part of the live stream, I have another subscription, which is based on Substack, which is where I have my newsletter and where I am the most interactive. And that will also be linked in the description box below if you're interested in that. But the Substack membership is $10 a month, okay, to be transparent, or $100 per year. And every Sunday, I do go live and I give the astrological and energetic update and forecast. And it's, like I said, it's interactive and I answer questions. And then monthly, I do a live Zoom where I go into more details for each month, readings through the signs. And in those monthly lives, there's also the opportunity to be read, both astrologically and psychically, combination of the two. That is with my Substack subscription. That is with my newsletter subscription, to be clear. The YouTube subscription, the one that is $7.99 a month, you will get the recordings of everything that I do on my Substack newsletter. To join the YouTube subscription, all you have to do is go right to my homepage and just click join. And once again, thank you to all of my amazing subscribers. I'm so thankful and grateful to each and every one of you. I'm also grateful that I get to provide this content, and I really hope that it supports you on your spiritual journey.